Hello and welcome to Two Mutables in a Pod. This is a podcast exploring all things taboo through the lens of spirituality, astrology, and bloody life experience. For all of you who are well versed in astrology, this is all the good stuff in the 8th house. My name is Bibi.
My name is Emily.
And we are your hosts. Hello and welcome to a special episode. This is episode 10, which is a little Brucey bonus for us to mark and celebrate having 10 episodes. So this is a very, very special one between Emily and I. And it's a conversation that we have been burning to get out there, and it's going to interface so many different topics. But the title of this one is called Trusting Energetics as a Language, which I think might be a bit much to kind of conceptualize and perhaps wrap our heads around. So I just wanted to break down, first of all, how this came about, and then what I mean by trusting energetics as a language. So Emily and I have had many conversations in the last few weeks specifically about the spiritual kind of industry, the spiritual complex, let's call it, and just a lot of practices that we've either experienced or we've witnessed or heard through our extended network. And running parallel to this, I was dipping my toe back into the dating scene, put myself online, and I just started to pick up on a lot of confusion in that experience. And I decided to take myself off of online dating. And one of the main reasons was an energetic vibration that I was picking up on. And in that moment, my guide said to me, you need to trust the energetics as language. And that for me was like really revolutionary, because what they were saying in that moment was you don't need a reason outside of yourself because it's already within yourself. So you can move, you can make a decision without having to justify, without having to do a whole 3,000 word essay with references. That is enough. So when I really sat with what does this mean, what they were saying to me, breaking it down, energetics is an art and it's a science of understanding how energy flows. And I think sometimes we can almost perceive energy as something that can we either have or we don't, but there's a constant movement and fluidity with it. And through that process, they were saying that this art and this science of energetics is what allows you to transform. It's what allows you to transmute experiences, but it's how you allow it to flow through a system, and that system being your body. So in this specific title or scenario, I'm talking about our metaphysical, our physical, and our spiritual body, and how that is enough for us to have cues, clues, indicators of the actions that we then need to take in order to allow the energy to flow more freely or more expressively. So the energetics as a language is for us to understand how the energy got there, how it can move through us, and whether we decide to keep it, as in store it, or whether we decide to release it. And a lot of this conversation, I hope, will encourage listeners to come closer to understanding and to trusting your own energetic system as a language, particularly when you're encountering or dealing with therapists, healers, spiritual readers, anyone in a helping capacity, or a person who you deem to have authority or power.
I'm literally sat here thinking, chat, you're taking us to church. Like, I think the way you broke it down is a science in itself. And I just couldn't help but be in awe of that Jupiter and Virgo really speaking the wisdom through. And I think, as we go through this topic, especially how you spoke about the processes of us feeling things as it flows through our body and all sorts, I think it's going to really I think I want to say shine a light, but also make sense to, the listeners, the people out there that are listening to us share our experiences, but also reflecting in their own life story. So that was really, really, really intense, but I think in such a way that you delivered it that it feels scientific. And it is scientific. It is a very much scientific process. Just leading on from where you have beautifully started, I think, as you've been mentioning, in our own shapes and forms, in our own personal conversations, what really sparked this conversation for us, and I would say, even in myself, just like the things that I've been watching, I just remember reaching out to Mimi and, we spoke about things that we had observed on our time, on Instagram, we've spoken about TV shows that I've come across that focus on a specific region in Southern Africa, but also reflecting on our personal experiences in times when we've also got readings done, spiritual readings, personal readings, love readings and the likes, and we are no stranger to any of these types of readings. So, when we're speaking from a place of experience. But I think what really sparked it was the rise in practices that feel a bit unethical or morally incorrect to a greater extent. And it got that conversation sparked for us. Like, we started to think about, okay, so, yes, we like what people are doing. We support the things. We are in some shape or form a part of these practices or groups, or I'm going to say services. Yeah, services is probably a better word. But, how do we regulate these things in an industry that's not really regulated?
Yeah.
And I think those kind of conversations really got us to the crux of where we are today in order to explore this topic in the way that we want to. So I kind of wanted to talk about that first. And then, the next entry point, should I say, as to how one might go into seeking spiritual consultations or reading. Now, me and Mimi typically refer to this as consultations because when we have consulted people from, Southern Africa, that's the term that's like, I want to say is specific to the region, but, you might hear the word consultation being used across different parts of the world. But there's also, I think in London, in the United Kingdom, people typically refer to this as readings. So it's the same thing, just different sides of the coin. And I think one of the, I was really thinking about this, but it didn't take me long to think about this because typically I want to say that a lot, for the majority of people, this is not everybody, but a typical starting point is around love, seeking clarity around love matters, love interests, confusion, but just around matters of the heart. And I think that has been my entry point at later periods in my life. I think that is a lot of people's entry points into readings or consultations. You also have, and this was my point, I remember in 2022, I was like, you know what, I need answers. And if you're somebody who's a curious soul like the both of us, you might figure out, you know what, like there's more than what meets the eye here. I kind of want to know what's going on in my bloodline or what's going on around me, whether you're facing stagnation, you might actually be going through a great time, but you still want to find out more answers about your roots, your origins. And I think these are typically some of the instances where people might consult. Someone might also consult or acquire a spiritual reading. Sometimes if they believe they've been hexed, if they've been cursed, if they've been bewitched, that could be by your relatives, which is typically, one of the things people are quite weary of. It could be your neighbors, it could be friends, there's a whole range of reasons why people believe that they're being bewitched or cursed by another. And I think for me, I broke this up when I thought about this. There was 3 things that I wanted to also talk about, which is the need to have answers, the want to have answers, and the desire. I think the need speaks to the more like pressing issues that you can't seem to shake off. But the desire also I want to say opens up a can of worms here, because desire is quite open-ended and it's not really restrained by a specific thing, object, or place. It's like, yeah, I just want to say like a flood of water. Like, you want to know, you have this ever burning desire to know more. And I think when you think about wanting as well, it's not a necessity as such, but it's something that you seek to desire to know more about. So I think those are the three terms that I wanted to also like play on words with, but also bring to your attention that they are different scenarios in which you could seek out a spiritual reading or consultation, but these typically tend to be like high ranking. And I don't know if that resonates for you, Mimi, if that's been some of your entry points into spiritual consultations or readings.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny because actually I was thinking I started getting readings when I was a teenager, and love and romance was not my entryway. It wasn't why I got into it. It was very much about family relationships and what is my life purpose? How can I connect to this purpose that I feel? It's only in my current phase of life, my 30s, that I've actually gone with the intention of love and romance. And before, it would like be a secondary thing that I sought to gain or receive from these consultations, but in the recent times it's very much become a primary. But I think
Yeah.
all of these consultations, or people who desire to have a consultation, I think it's important to highlight, because Emily beautifully said the desire, the want, and the need, is that all of these in some shape or capacity mean or have the undertone of vulnerability from the person who's the one that's like reaching out to have these consultations. And I think it's important to highlight that when you're in that state of seeking answers, which we all have been there, we are all going to continuously want to be there. That requires quite a rawness and an openness for you to open up your own energy to even enter into that spiritual sphere, to then start to even try to do the maths of who can I go to, who can I trust, and that will become a bit of a thread with the conversation that we're going to have. Just being very aware that from the very starting point, you're in a bit of a potentially rocky, energetic ground.
I think, you know what, I really like, if I could like highlight this part visually so people can see, I really love this statement because we might not physically see, we can energetically feel that we're in a rocky part. And we might even at the point, we might be at a rocky part quite early on in our stages of seeking where to go, who to consult, who to trust, and who not to trust. And then, you might actually leave it some time, you might get on with life and then eventually get back to it. But you might not realize that that rocky energy still is innately embedded within you because it's an energy. And therefore, you might feel that you stepped out by energy, but that person who, I'm just going to say, might typically abuse their power, might, I want to say, take on bad practices before we get into the depths of this conversation. And they might be able to prey on those things that they can pick up and feel as a result of the energetics, So that's something to bear in mind. But I really like the fact that, you've spoken about the entry point, but also tie that into the fact that this is also a key stage where a lot of people tend to fall into the rock and the hard place.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to call it the rock and the hard place because I've been there. I want the answers. I need that clarity. I need that stillness. And that's why I say there's a difference between desiring, there's a difference between needing, there's a difference between wanting. A lot of the times, I think when I thought I needed it, I just desired it, as opposed to it actually being a want or something that is a necessity.
Yeah, and it can change that desire, that want, and that need. You can enter into it thinking it's desire, and then all of a sudden you're in that confrontation, and it's like, no, I need to know, I want to know, and the urgency builds and builds and builds. And you've been there, as you've like said, and I've been there, and I can speak on recently how my own energy was so fragmented when I was going to consultations in recent months, and I was just really destabilized to begin with. And then I had multiple experiences that took me up and down this roller coaster. And it's not necessarily a reflection of all of the practitioners. It was very
Mm-hmm.
much a reflection of my own energetic state as I entered into these consultations, and this like unshakable quote need to know, and this quote need to have the answers to something that I desired to seek control over, because I was completely out of my depth and completely out of control. And that fact, like that opened up the the energetic portals. That wasn't what I was going to say, but that's what came out. To then give me quite a mixture of experiences. Some took me to hell. Like, let's be for real. Like, some really took me to hell. And I was very much in the sunken place, and Emily was there, like, trying to, like, hold me with her two hands, her two spiritual hands and her heart, because it was just, I don't think I've ever been taken that low because of a consultation. But again,
Yeah.
I'm not blaming that person, because I understand that a part of it was my own starting energetic
Yeah.
fragmentation.
I think I really need us to like go back to this point where you mentioned
Mm,
that you could start out with the need, but then that need could quickly and quite, yeah. I think a lot of these transformations occur quite quickly. Sometimes they might not, but then that need could also turn into the desire of wanting to control the outcomes of the situations where you are used to things going in a particular way. It's
yeah.
out of your comfort zone. You are in the depths of, matters of the heart.
Mm,
You might be in the depths of dealing with familial matters. But I think the the interchangeability between all these three terms is very important,
mhm.
and I think they stay quite fluid. They're never fixed, they're never rigid.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we've like stressed this point, but I need to stress it again, because in like the birth and the motherhood spaces, they call it the scaffolding of interventions. When you take one, like you take a paracetamol for, you're in labor, you're in pain, you take a paracetamol, and then once you take that paracetamol, your practitioner then offers you the next level of drug. So then you're offered morphine, then you're offered the next level of drug, because that's not touching the sides. You're then given injectables, and then it's like you're all the way potentially up to being emergency C-section. So this is how quickly things can escalate within the spiritual terms, because you go into one, then you're into another, then you're at the next level. And that can go from that desire, want, and need. And it can also link to like the loop of going to consult people, going to consult the same person multiple times, or going to consult multiple practitioners on the same topic, the same birth, the same child, the same issue that you're having. So that scaffolding of interventions is a very real thing. Again, I've been there very recently, so I'm not speaking from a place of shame or judgment, but more from a, I get it, bitch. Like I've been there.
No, if you guys could see me, hands on my head, mouth flabbergasted, because I think you were saying things that I have done myself.
Mm,
And this is why I love us, because we're not going to come here and talk about something that we have not tested or tried. And we're not going to shy away from the fact that, yes, we did get burned.
mm,
Yes, it was, but like sometimes it's been a good experience. Sometimes we've been burnt. Sometimes, as my good friend has said, she went to hell and back. And I think that's the realness that you get from us from our experiences, but also in the people that I love and hold quite dearly. I've also seen them go through similar things,
yeah,
and even in shows that I've watched that I'm not related to any of these people, the threads of the themes that we're talking about are quite similar.
yeah,
But you were taking me to church with how you explained, like, what you did about the whole motherhood sliding scale,
mm,
and how it just keeps going up and up and up, and how that can be compared to when you're in a state of anguish. I'm going to call it anguish because you are anguished. Like, you
mm,
can't have a steady night's sleep. Your mind is racing through the day. The the next plausible thing seems to, I need to get
yeah,
answers. That need as we quite said, you know, and I don't want it to seem like we're repeating ourselves because we really aren't, but we really need to hone in this point before we get to the rest of the, you know, the bulk of our discussion, that need, want, and desire can change quite quickly. And it's just having an awareness of that. Yeah.
For real, for real. And the knock-on effects, I guess, like from keeping yourself in the loop of like these consultations, is it pushes you further and further away from what I was talking about at the start in terms of being able to identify the energetics of the language, sorry, of your own energetics. And that can be a two-way thing because it's also the language that your guides then channel through your own energetics portal. So it's your own energetics as in your physical body, but there's also pathways where your guides or your ancestors will then communicate to you through that portal, and then that is your energy as well. So it can be a two-way thing between you and your guides, I feel. But one of the things that I experienced, and I think I want to bring in my recent experience here because it's a real life example, but I noticed that I was getting further and further away from my own voice, my own intuition, and my self trust. And Emily really had to gather me here and say to me, like, what's going on here? Like, this isn't you, your intuition. Like, what were you seeing? What were you feeling? And Emily really had to be like a grounding stable voice for me in this season, because through this process of me being in the loop of consultation, I was flapping in the wind. I could not gather myself. I could not figure out what my head was telling me, what my intuition was telling me, what my ancestors were telling me, what these consultations were telling me. I was just in a bit of a tailspin. But I specifically want to highlight one consultation that I experienced, because my body, my intuition, that energetics portal was screaming at me from beginning, middle, and end. And because my self trust had already like deteriorated by that point, I just couldn't tune into the language, because by that point, I think it was like my third. I was at my third like consultation or experience on this one scenario, and my self-trust was gone. So I couldn't listen, I couldn't tune into the language. It was foreign to me, and it happened within the space of weeks. Like, that language that you build can be dismantled in moments. And this is why I really want to share this, because it's so important for you to be constantly communing with that energetics language, because that's what can allow that to remain as part of your foundation. So I think the night before I knew that this like consultation was going to happen, I remember I had quite a significant dream, and I just thought, oh no, everything's turning bad now, like the outcome's going to be bad. And the dream felt like it was a messenger, of course, but it also it just felt very foreign to my energy. And I think from that moment I was like, okay, I don't recognize this language. I don't I don't know what's happening here. By the way, Emily warned me, and she said she did tell me not to go through this process, but I didn't listen. And then the morning, so this was happening in the afternoon, that like a few hours before, maybe like 1 or 2 hours before, I remember sitting on my sofa, and then all of a sudden I was horizontal. It was like something came over me, and I just felt so exhausted, and I was like, I need to sleep. But my child's running around like going crazy. I can't sleep right now. But my all my energy was again depleted. And I was like, oh, this is a bit strange. But again, because it felt foreign to me, I couldn't identify what it was. The minute that consultation begun, I was like, oh, bitch, we're at a funeral. we are at a funeral. Like, the energy is dense. I've never experienced any type of kind of spiritual, whatever you want to call it, like this. And I was texting Emily during this process, and I think I ended up having both of us on the edge because it was just a lot. And I think for 24 hours, I had that energy, well, maybe less. I had that energy with me of this denseness that I just felt like I was in the gutter with what I had just experienced, the energy of what I picked up on other people's experiences, but also a level of mistrust with myself, mistrust with the situation that I was seeking support with or on. And it really destabilized me even further. But that was also the catalyst for me to then find my way back to my own lane of energetics, because that was the moment I said, okay, I need to cleanse my energy. I need to come back to myself. I need to ground myself. And I was very intentional in doing that. So I don't know what it was like for you, as like the friend being there, witnessing it.
You know what? So many things. Like, I honestly think I should have a jotter pad out because as you were walking, so many things are flying back, and I was just visualizing that whole experience. But firstly, I want to say the dismantling of something that you spent, just imagine how long you spent cultivating your intuition, being able to hear the channel messages that you need to hear, whether that's through psychic knowledge, whether that's through visions, whether that's through any kind of medium that you get your messages from your ancestors and your guides that walk with you. That disappearing within, and it can happen within a blink of an eyelid. I think that is very scary, and that's where a lot of the danger lies, because then, as you mentioned, the energetics of yourself being able to trust what you were feeling, it dissipated to some extent. I think another thing it is that kept coming to me as you're speaking is that your energy is your life force. Your energy is your life force. And without, like, you can see when somebody's not filled with energy, they look grey, they look pale, they look, I don't want to say abysmal, but they just look like they have been sapped out of life. Essentially, you can compare that person to a walking zombie. And there's many people who, walk this earth without that soul, without that spark, without that color. And I think that energy force, the energetics, that is your own personal language that you have been passed down from previous lifetimes, whether, it's even the relatives that live with you, not necessarily just the people that have passed, but if you have people who have impacted your life, shaped your life, been a catalyst for the healing work that you do in your personal life, or whether as a practitioner, I think that, yeah, your energy force is very important. The Iba people call this your chi. And it's a very deep word. When I hear the word chi, it's like, this is talking to the depths of my soul, like the blood that is in the marrow, the bones that like lay a foundation within me. So I think when you were talking, seeing you as like your friend, I want to say this. You introduced me to the person, and I love their writing style. I can't even lie. I love the way they write. They very much prophetess vibes I'm getting from this individual. Cool. So, I subscribed, whatever the case was. And then we had been talking, and you mentioned, you had this up, you had this planned, and, give it a read. What do you think? And me and Mimi have always spoke about foreign entities or foreign gods, demigods, that we or our people were not aware of. And I think the first thing for me is like, it sounds beautifully written, but the first flag for me was, who are these councils? We do not know them. And I don't want to take authority like I know all your people, because your bloodline could be very mixed, very varied, we're yet to discover all of those answers. But at that time, I'm not going to lie to you guys, I just said, my friend don't need these people to tell him this. Like, she doesn't need this counsel. Who are these people? And that's the first thing that we flagged up. But I get it. Having been somebody who needs to go through the experience, I understand that, quite like myself, you are like that too. And I think, as you mentioned quite early on, this was the catalyst for you to call yourself back to yourself, the energetics of your own spirit back to you, so you can understand that language like you always have been doing. But I think, I realized that at that point, this was all part, like when you went on to write Revoke the Contract, which is very good, which you need to read on Substack. It made sense why you had to go through this whole process. It made sense why your guides even, and how you mentioned where systems, languages, ancient languages, even ways of channeling and receiving messages would have been built and installed and dismantled very quickly under these practices, readings, or consultations. I also think that while some ancestor or ancestral spirits or spirit guide spirits might be like, I'm speaking more so in the Southern African sense, people say they're quite strict or they're no nonsense. I think there are also some that are very loving. And I think in that process, they were still holding your hand, but they needed you to go through what you went through. The second thing for me, which kind of like was like alarm bells, is, why this word divorce? Like, what's, sorry, it's quite a heavy word. Even in the physical realm where we live, in family law, people try to go through arbitration first before they go through the route of divorce. The grounds to divorce, whilst it's been, I guess you can say there has been a rise in the present day, typically it's been a high standard that you have to attain, I think, anyway. Otherwise, most people would be walking through the courts and they'd be like, hey, I got my divorce. So I just thought that, nah, man, I don't think your situation is at this level. But I also understood that, there were some parts of this reading that felt like, okay, cool, it could help you, it could provide a bit more clarity. I like how this particular practitioner broke down some of the ways in which they were going to deliver it. But as you were even receiving the consultation of reading, I was also confused, like, why is there so many people? The energies are mixing, and how you're speaking about the energetics, it's like, you were even telling me that some people were getting their readings mixed up, and I just thought that, man. And then when you messaged me, I felt very on edge, like I was anxious. Of course, I'm going to be anxious because I'm like, I want to know what's going on. I want to know if everything's okay. But I just felt on edge. Like, and I was like, I wasn't feeling this way with the other ones that you did. So why am I feeling this way with this? And I think for me, that's when I realized that, nah, man, you as your spirit, you as Mimi that I know, yeah, you are the channeler of your own life. You are that energy force. Yes, we are going to have guidance. We're going to have guiders. We're going to have mentors. But above everything else, knowing how I know you, I was like, nah, man, your spirit is your spirit. It's the energetics and the energy of your own life. So I, at that point, could feel the shift following that reading. It was hard to watch because I'm not physically there, but then I'm also in the ways that you mentioned. I know my spiritual soul was definitely, holding on and like beside you, but I felt that in the physical as well, I didn't want you to feel that or have the questions around, but how did I not see this? And why did they see that? And I didn't see this? Because I think it can also create that, well, so my spirit isn't as clear, or my spirit isn't able to see X, Y, and Z. And I that's the part where I was like, you know what, friend, we need to come back to the drawing board, because your spirit, when we trace back to how you've lived life, to how you've got to where you are right now, your spirit has never failed you. Your guides, your ancestors who walk with you have never failed you. No matter what darkness exists around you, no matter what attacks might be going around you, you have been protected by God, by your ancestors, by your guardian angels to this point thus far. So their energy is not lying, and they don't play over your life. So that's when I realized that these are some of the dangers that can arise, because you as somebody who I know, girl, your channel tarots, your zodiac readings for the different zodiac months we would enter into, I'd be like, damn, how is this so accurate? And those are your tarot scopes. You were doing that like off the back of your hand, and then having that questioning, that seed of doubt planted as a result of that particular reading, I was like, yeah, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's have a conversation. And I think we did. We had multiple conversations. We unpacked to repack to unpack again. But I think one of the important points that we reach is that your spirit, above anybody else's, will always tell you the answers that you need to hear.
Yeah. I think I want to just kind of, for anyone else who's listening out there, it's not to say that my spirit is this, that, or the other, but it's just to kind of say I'm someone who's grown up with this kind of access to esoteric knowledge and metaphysical world. And in some ways, I should have built a built-in layer of like protection or insight or awareness, but yet I still had to go through this process. And I understand why on a spiritual level, but that's me with the experience and knowledge that I have. So it just makes me think, okay, what about the people who don't necessarily have that and just have a gentle curiosity around these realms, and then they enter into something that's potentially quite destabilizing or complex, and then where does it then leave them and their relationship with themselves? So it's more just as like I want to give this as almost like a quote worst case scenario, because it can happen to anyone, and unfortunately it does happen to people, and it happens in more atrocious and more damaging ways for other people. And I think that's something that we really want to highlight during this episode, so that we can also share how to kind of be on the lookout for things.
No, literally be on the lookout. Because I think one thing that I, as a result of not even just this experience that you went through recently, but also just the things that we are about to speak about, I think you do need to be on the lookout, like Inspector Gadget, because a lot of people are siphoning, scamming. We're going to talk about this as we go on to it, but in today's world where as much as we can boo down the capitalistic, modality of gaining funds, access to resources, some of us are still not out here doing this stuff. So I still don't think that's excusable. But money has become a real bargaining tool in this space or in these spaces.
No, sorry. I'm just like, you said siphoning and scamming. Ooh.
No, very real. And I think do you know why I say, how you can put up your hands and say it's a very real thing? Because I have seen it within the people who are in close proximity to me, but I've also seen it as a universal language across the globe. This is not just an African problem. You can go to any part of the world specifically within the healing spaces, within the healing practitioners, whether it's, as you mentioned, there could be therapists, it could be actual root workers, spiritual workers, it could be a counselor, it could be somebody with a position of trust. I studied tort law, and that is when you have a fiduciary duty, like you're also bestowed with a position of trust. You are set to a standard that's higher than the average person, than the lay person, because you really have a standard of care that you owe to these people that you're looking after. And this is why the questions around regulation, or why there is a lack thereof of that in this sector, is also quite concerning. But I'm going to go on to this point, which how we spoke about the damaging effects for people who, this was quite like myself. I wouldn't even say a few years ago, not even that long ago. I think I've mentioned on this pod, I really started consulting in 2022. So let's just say we're in 2025, that's 3 years. I'm still a baby in this stuff. I'm in no shape or form, like my good friend has been doing this for quite a while. I'm still a baby in this. And I think the effects for people like us who are still newbies, still curious, but still wanting to know answers, can really lead you to a damaging place if, that awareness is not found. But one of the things for me that I want to talk about today is the one size fits all policy and the curse of the dark clouds. Now, this is very region specific. It's very region specific. So, please forgive me or please permit me to share my experiences on this if you are unfamiliar of the Southern African modality of healing, particularly that involves a sangoma, a healer, a traditional healer. Now, this is not to brand everybody under the same brush. There are some people who are still working with integrity. But even as a result of the shows that I have watched that are primarily based around bringing awareness to practices that are malpracticed, deception, scheming, scamming, siphoning, as I've mentioned, I've realized that I see a lot of the experiences on TV in the life of myself and even the people that I know near and dear. So the one size fits all policy for me, I have come to realize over the the very colorful 3 years of engaging in this kind of alternative healing, is that there is not a one size there is really not a one size fits all here, but I need you to understand, if you are starting out, particularly if you are trying to consult back home and you don't have relatives that you can trust, you don't have people who, you're even talking to this about. I need you to know, as cliche as this sounds, there is not a one size fits all policy. And if somebody gives you a diagnosis, a spiritual diagnosis, just like you would do at a doctor's surgery, you can rebut that. You can question that. You can have questions around that. If a doctor came to you today, and this happened to me, I had a rash that came up all over my body last year. Was it last year? 2024. And the doctor tried to tell me this was eczema. In my right spirit, body, soul, and mind, I knew this was not eczema. I disputed it on all levels. I ended up finding out my own diagnosis, which is quite ironic and quite, I want to say, synonymous with what today's discussion is about as well. But I want you to understand that the one size fit all policy and how that doesn't have to be your story is a very important thing. If it's your first time, if you're new to consulting, even if you've been doing this for a while, but we have to remember that far and few between people are generally doing this for the work of helping, transforming, and shaping people's lives, or putting them on the path, equipping them with the tools they need in order to take control over their own healing. A lot of this, and I call it the curse of the dark clouds, because I found that in conversations with my Southern African sisters, and I can't say brothers, I typically know more women than men, so my Southern African sisters, when we've communed together in like conversations I've had on a personal and private level, I have found that the entry point in these conversations always centers around a dark cloud. As to what this dark cloud is, though, it's very vague, very ambiguous, very undetailed. And I think this is where the danger lies. And this is why I say we must learn, as Mimi has been saying, the energetics, trusting that energetics. If somebody says to you that, I'm speaking specifically about the Southern African context, but you could go to another part of the world and they say your family, there's a spirit that follows you guys, and it's that. Listen, if your spirit says, nah, man, and you're not dismissing the person, but you're listening to what they're saying, and the pieces really aren't piecing, please understand that 9 times out of 10, this is probably the entry starting point of the one size fits all policy. 2, if it does not fit, let it fly. If the shoe does not fit, let it fly. You, just as you are in the doctor's surgery, allowed to refute, rebuttal, even like dismiss what somebody has said as medical advice, you have and you are in your rights in this instance. Don't for ever 1 second think just because you are in the diaspora and you're consulting people back home, that you don't have a say, you don't have a right. Yes, respect is important. Respect is reciprocated and reciprocal, but never under this sun here in this, I want to say in this United Kingdom because that's where we are, but across the globe, never allow yourself to be convinced. I'm going to say the word convinced. I wanted to say the word fooled, but I'm not going to say that. Sorry, that is your story. And I say that because I have been there. People that I know near and dear, this is typically what they're told in the beginning. And as I mentioned, it's always ambiguous. When you ask specifically, it can never, don't get me wrong, there probably are people who can pinpoint specifically where this specific dark cloud is coming from. But even the context of the word a dark cloud, automatically you are left with this feeling of fear, dread, and anxiety. You spend the next remaining days, months, years of your life questioning, is this dark cloud hovering over me? Till this present day, as we speak, I sometimes think, is the dark cloud still there in my life? And child, I would have done that consultation. It never leaves you. These words haunt you. And this is why I say, honestly, wherever you go, it's country specific, it's content region specific, even. It could even be tribally specific to a tribe that you might be consulting, or an ethnic group, sorry. But I just want to say here, if something is said to you and it's your first time consulting with the person and it doesn't fit right and it doesn't sound right, please let it fly. I can't take away, like, I wish I could say that the words of the dark clouds that I've been told by various people has left my mind, but it's never. Yeah. I'm always living in a state of questioning whether this dark cloud is still following me till this present day. And I think it's something that a lot of people around me can also testify to, that it almost becomes, and I've titled this as the pretext and preamble. You know, when you read a book and there's a preamble, thank you to my friends and my loved ones for allowing, that is how I feel with the dark cloud situation, the curse of the dark clouds. It's almost when you go into consult, the first thing you're told is there's a dark cloud over you. Willisimyama, my baddies, this is what they say in the language. And you're like, what are these? Can you please elaborate? What are these dark clouds? And it's almost always very ambiguous. And I've come to realize that it's important to understand the patterns. If it's your first time consulting, cool. If you go for a second and third time, you might even go for a fourth time. If these words start to sound very similar, please understand that you might be observing the one side of it all, honestly. And I'm laughing because, it sounds funny right now, but when you're actually going through it, like I have, like people that I know have, it's actually not funny. And I was speaking to Mimi and I said this to Mimi, and I also said this to a really close family friend. What is this dark cloud? Why is it that it's almost the case for everybody that there is this dark cloud? What is the origins of this dark cloud? Can you please tell me? And we always in conversations still don't know. Does life stop when there's a dark cloud over you? Like, we can't stop. And I will say this with my hand on my chest. People are going to dislike you. People are going to be envious of you in this lifetime. People, relatives, friends, whatever the case might be, might not want to see you doing or accomplishing certain things. We cannot stop those things. We cannot stop evil eye. And as much as people want to say it can be stopped, you're going to spend a whole lifetime trying to stop these very things. You can deter these things. You can ward them. But I think to have this feeling that, these clouds are following you and it's people doing something to you, or you've acquired it from somewhere, or someone's sent it to you, it can lead you to live a life that's filled with anxiety, dread, and fear. And I think here, this also going back to trusting the energetics as a language can also interfere with how you even deal with your own energetics. Like, how are you going to be in the right state of mind to even receive messages, channel messages from the people who are supposed to be guiding you, shaping you, refining you in the spiritual realm? Like, you're going to be so clouded. And I say this because I've been there. Still am there, still struggling with that word, the dark cloud. Anytime I see a cloud, I'm thinking, hey, is it the dark cloud? I'm just joking. But it gets very real and very serious. Sorry, I know. No, it does, right? It does.
I had to whip up my notes because you have been spitting facts. I was like, point after point is hitting. But you're right, like these things carry weight, and amongst all of us, we're all still questioning what is this dark cloud and why do we all have it? Every single one of us has this dark cloud, yet we don't know what it is. All we know is that we all carry it. It's all witnessed within our energy, and we're told, you need to come back. You need to come back. You need to do this consultation. You need to go and do this cleansing. And again, that is that scaffolding technique where you're in an experience and then you're sold the next thing, or you're told you need to return for the next thing, because that's the thing that's going to get rid of this dark cloud. That's the thing that's going to rid you of this energy and set you on your path to freedom. But it requires some sort of investment. Let's be honest, it requires monetary investment, it requires an exchange in order for you to get rid of this dark cloud, without guarantee that it's actually going to get rid of this dark cloud. And this is the thing, like, I want to be quite careful, because for me it's problematic that promises can be made in that way. And I'm not saying they're promising it, but they are promising it with no guarantee that it is likely, feasible, or possible. And you made just so many good points. Like, you could spend a literal lifetime with those words ringing in your head, but you can also spend a lifetime trying to get rid of this dark cloud. And again, if you think from the energy perspective, if you're focusing your entire life trying to get rid of this dark cloud, you're just focusing on this mysterious dark cloud that you're probably calling it in yourself. That is how energy works. Instead of focusing on your daily life, your experience, what else is possible in terms of a joy and like just abundant sense, because you've been told this, you spend your time just focusing and looking in the other direction. So of course it's going to be there. And again, I'm not saying this from a preachy perspective. I'm saying this because I have experienced it myself. There are days when that dark cloud is all I can see, because that's all I'm looking at.
Child, no. You said investment.
Yeah.
And it really, what you said here about the investment, it's like there is no being rid or free of this dark cloud hovering over you, your finances, your life, your love life, without that one step next. Let's get to the, and it's like it almost becomes a pyramid scheme. And I question and I wonder, why is it that we're never given the tools to actually, as opposed to paying a specific individual? Yes, I get it. It's healing work. This is the work they do. Most times it is their livelihood. But why not equip us with the tools to be able to do this cleansing work ourselves? And cool. We also acknowledge, and we're not taking away from the fact that there are certain instances, scenarios, and I guess stages in your life which you will have to ramp up the cleansing work. Cool. But it shouldn't need to be that I can only cleanse on the basis or on the premise that this person, I am going to pay this person to do the cleansing. I think people should be taught, or what practitioners should, I guess, at least desire to work towards teaching people how to equip themselves, how to do these things themselves. And also, above every cleansing, finding out the root cause for where this comes from. Because like I said, in a lot of instances, it's typically like, it's very vague answers I'm getting about where this dark cloud originates from. And I think this stuff you can actually find on YouTube. Loads of people talk about it. And I think it's not just specific to the region of Southern Africa. Even if you go to Nigeria, India, China, you will hear people talking about dark clouds, dark spirits, spirits that latch on, right? We're not denying their existence, but it's like, why does that have to be the preamble into someone's healing? Why can't we focus and shine a light on the things that are positive whilst tackling the things that still need to be rectified, but in a way that's self-empowering? And I think one thing for me is that the impact of these words, as you mentioned, yes, we were talking about your scenario and what you went through, but you've got years under your belt. some of us don't have those years under our belt. So the first things we're hearing is this dark cloud. We go to sleep, we're having nightmares because we're anxious about the dark cloud. We can't even step inside our house without the lights being on because we're worried about the dark cloud. And I think people don't realize that the impact of these words, how they stay in the mind, the psyche of a lot of people. And it's like we're almost never free from the spirit in the first place because we've just chained ourselves down to it because the dark cloud has so much power over us. So yeah, I did want to talk about that, and I wanted to let people know that it's not region specific. It definitely is a universal problem and a universal issue, but it's something that I do think with time, with working with the right people, trusting your own energetics as to who you should even go to in the first place, which we'll detail a bit later on in the conversation, will help you navigate these one-size-fits-all policies so you don't fall privy to these, I'm going to call them, some of them are predators. Yeah.
Which leads us very nicely on to a case study, I suppose we can call it. Now, I just want to give a quick trigger warning because this details topics of a sensitive nature, very real topic, and it relates to abuse, assault of a sexual nature. So if that is something that you are not in a space to be able to hear, then please skip ahead. But I just wanted for us to discuss this because whilst we're talking about it on an energetic level, some of these insidious kind of patterns and behaviors can manifest on a very physical level. And whether we think of, when we're talking about the spiritual and energetics of it, that is a form of abuse, but there is also the physical and the emotional and the mental abuse that can occur within these spaces, within these kind of engagements with practitioners who might not have the best intentions, let's say. So I came across this very randomly on Facebook, of all places, of an article of a man who was in his late 70s, UK based, who is a spiritual healer and had a shop, and he has been convicted of sexual assault against an individual who sought to have assistance, who sought his support in terms of, I don't know if it actually mentions what it was specifically, but this individual was going to this person for healing. This person was going to rectify or to balance some sort of thing that they might have been transitioning through from a more spiritual and holistic perspective. And the perpetrator misused and abused their power. They effectively, in my eyes, groomed the person, and they abused their position of trust and ended up getting quite a significant amount of money, I believe, from this person, as well as sexually abusing them, under the guise of needing to remove these spirits. And the only way was through a sexual act. This is problematic on so many different levels, but I want to highlight this as an example of how it can be, how this can be experienced on a physical and mental level, but also to highlight that this happens or can happen in any capacity, under any denomination, any kind of alignment with a belief, or even within, like, outside of belief and religion. It's about someone in a position of trust, someone in a position of authority, because I suspect this person would have been someone who was known in their community and built a name based on their brand, what they were doing, the services, what they were selling. But behind the scenes, there was a more nefarious encounter, engagement that was happening. It's unfortunate that it's obviously, it feels shocking, but it shouldn't feel shocking because of how often it happens. And I wonder how many people have experienced this, maybe on a more granular level, that aren't necessarily speaking about it. So how many people have experienced healers, therapists, or anyone in a position of power who have sowed the seed of doubt and then have continued to manipulate the story around this seed of doubt, so that the person then feels that they have to go in for more work, for more healing, or then has to compromise themselves, or in different ways. And it was a hard thing to read, but that wasn't my experience. And I want to try and sensitively frame it in a way, because there is someone who has had this experience, and this is a very real case study. And that person's life has changed. That person now lives with the fact that they went to someone from a vulnerable position and they took advantage of that under the guise of healing. Yeah.
You know, one thing, as you were speaking, like I literally I was like, let me go to the Met Police. And as you mentioned, this is somebody's real life. And even though we are discussing this as a case study, it never takes away from the fact that this is a soul that had to actually endure this. Like, they went there seeking assistance and they've come out. I'm not being taken advantage of, being scammed, degraded. There's so many things that I can term this individual's actions, the, in quotation marks, spiritual worker / healer / practitioner. But I think at the end of the day, this is somebody's real life. Like, they are now going to have to. The dark cloud weighs so heavy on me that, and I haven't even, experienced a fraction of what they have had to go through. So I can't even find the words to intellectualize the process that they're going to have to start, or the road to recovery and healing. But I do, in my own ways and forms and shape, and like for my own energy, pray that they have a support system, because a lot of this stuff requires you to revisit a particular scenario, a particular thing. Like, even till this present day, I revisit the particular consultation that I had that sparked that for me.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get that out of my mind. But as you were speaking, I was taken back to the part of the article. The victim, there was a spirit inside of her which would eventually kill her. This is even worse than the dark cloud.
Yeah.
If you think about how intentional the words are. Like, the power of words should never be underestimated. I guess this is why they say there's certain words you just can never take back once you've said them to someone, because it's so deeply ingrained into the person's psyche. And I think telling somebody who's already on edge about life, we don't know the specifics, I guess, circumstances as to why she would have gone there. But it says she was referred there by a family friend, or I think a friend. Cool. So something in life would have already not been adding up, as we spoke about, going into these spaces with the energetics of our own language, our own bodies, our own spirits being slightly off. We're vulnerable, essentially. And then someone's telling you that the spirit that's living within you can kill you. That can send you into a spiral. And there are no safeguards that can mentally, psychologically, and even socially assist you if you don't have anyone to speak to. Or even if people have gone through, do you know what? Not having anyone to speak to is one thing, but if you've had people who have gone through the same thing and they say, it's not that deep, just get it done and you'll do it. That's even far more dangerous, actually. That's far more dangerous. So it's also, you could not be surrounded by people, but the people who are surrounded by, if they're not like, let's clock it, this isn't adding up. Why would you have a spirit that's, you can actually fall prey to these kinds of manipulative schemes, predatory behaviors, people who are out there to lure, to be leeches and drain you in different sects and area of your lives. But then it says that, convince the victim of his healing capability. And as you mentioned, Mimi, there's almost this premise, or there's almost this like unspoken it is spoken as well, that you will be healed. Let me not say it's unspoken. There's almost this guarantee that once you've done this healing thing and you've paid the money that you've paid and you've done the procedures, you're gonna be healed. But it's like, where is the guarantee? None of us can ever guarantee. And especially if you're in the healing spaces, I think it's very important. I mean, this is why beauticians have indemnity insurances, just to, they might do a treatment and it might go wrong. I think because there is the lack of regulation, people are making such wild claims that no, this is going to heal you and heal you in full, that you get that, I want to say, false surety from them, because you trust the position of where they're at. This person is an esteemed person in the community. They've been doing this healing work for years. I can trust them because somebody close to me also recommended them. Cool. The other point I just saw in the article before I round up is, so the victim had to purchase a guard ring, a healing bath, and her mother's house was cleaned of spirits. Which spirits, we don't know. And that's my issue. There's always ambiguity, never clarity. And one thing I've learned in law, well, when I studied my undergrad in law, was terms need to be unequivocally clear. Like, we need to clearly be able to expressly understand what you're saying. And that's why it's never sat right for my spirit, as a curious soul, as a soul who wants to figure out more about my lineage, my bloodline, why things aren't opening up, what's going on with my life, dating, love, relationships, and the likes, why ambiguous statements like that will always throw me off. But because I've not been able to trust the energetics, sometimes I have fallen prey to just believing that, the spirit is, there's a spirit and it's following me, but I don't know the origins of the spirit. And that's, as we're going to go on to a bit later, some of the green flags that turn into red flags is this point here, not knowing the specific spirit. I think even in the Bible, cool, I'm not saying come from this like biblical perspective, but they were able to name and change spirits and curse them out into the pigs. They knew what spirits they were commanding. And no matter whatever religious text you do follow, whether that's, whether you're a monk, whether you're Buddhist, whether you're, whatever you practice, I think we need to question why things are not specific. If someone's telling you something from a position of power, they're telling you have a spirit in you, we need to be able to start answering back and say, so what is the specific spirit? Now, people can lie. I'm not saying when you've asked this person, you're going to get a truthful answer. No. Sometimes you do need to wait for your spirit to tell you. Sometimes you need confirmation. There's an array of things that come into play. But I think at least you can sit with that and work with something, as opposed to being told that something's killing you. There's a spirit in your mum's house. So she purchased a ring. She had to get the bath. They got the house cleaned. And the total cost of the acts that the victim and her family had to pay was 13,000 Great British pounds. Now, I can't even say that this sum here isn't a sum that they were charging back in Africa. I think they would even add times 2 to it in Africa.
The thing is, we don't know of that person's financial situation, but when you put it into the context of what this person was told of, you will die if you don't do XYZ. If you think your life is on the line and you've been broken down to such a point where you're like, how can I live? Well, you will find the money. You'll somehow find a way to resource this, because you're just trying to survive at the very bare minimum. And this is where it's not the victim's fault. It can never be the victim's fault. But this is where the perpetrator was masterfully and very intentionally harmful in their actions, because they knew how to manipulate. They knew exactly what to say. They knew exactly how to maneuver their way into that family, because it was a family friend that made that recommendation. So he knew how to build trust. And this is where it's, for me, it's like, it's mind-blowing, but it's unfortunate, but it's unfortunate that this happens so often. So that person just literally was just trying to survive. That's all they were trying to do. And here comes this person, like, just absolutely compromising the shit out of them.
And no, you've actually just said it. Whilst we aren't privy to the information, the details in regards to the victim's financial standing, you will find more often than not, you're going to find a way to make a way when your livelihood, your life, forget your livelihood, let me X that out, your life is said to be under attack by spirits. And this is why I say the entry point of generic sweeping statements is far damaging. And we can't underestimate or sweep these statements under the rug anymore.
Mm-mm.
Because as we can clearly see, these services are not regulated. And as people where accessibility to these services in this present day is far much easier than it was back in the day. And I think even though it occurred back in the day, perhaps it wasn't as televised, digitalized, or shared in the community as widely and openly as it is discussed now. Because I've been to that specific shop, and like when you go onto it on Google, it's rated quite highly. It's actually got decent reviews on it. Well, this is like 20, wait, no, this was 2022 times, I'm going to say, in 2022, when I was seeking out candles. And the shop was bustling, actually. People were there.
Okay.
So it's one that people know as a popular shop. Loads of people frequent this shop. I think that what you said in regards to how that simple statement of spirits led into they're also killing you. You need to buy a ring. You need to get the houses clean. You need to do this. And 13,000K in this cost of living crisis and inflation, and it's been over years, I guess. It's not just a one-time thing, I'm assuming. I don't know the specifics. It could just be one whole entitled payment, but it seems like it was different procedures. As you spoke about the sliding scale, how it starts with, ibuprofen or paracetamol, then it goes to this, then it goes to that. I think there is danger in these swooping statements.
Yeah.
And that's why I say, yeah, let me not even, we're going to go into a bit more. So let me just, yeah.
We will. Just so many things. I just wanted to kind of like piggyback off of a couple of your points. You mentioned about the beauty industry and having indemnity insurance. And this is something you and I have spoken about in the early days, about the lack of regulation within the spiritual complex or industry.
Yes.
And I do want to obviously mention that I straddle both lanes, if you like, where I'm a consumer of esoteric and spiritual services, products, knowledge, teachings, whatever, but I'm also a practitioner. So because I'm on the both sides, and maybe it's because I come from a health background, I have indemnity insurance. Like, there's no paperwork that you can say, have you got this? And I'll be like, no, because I've got it. And I've never understood why. And I've been in spaces where spiritual practitioners have actively said, you don't need that. We're working with like spirits and energy, and like, why do you need that? Like, that's just a capitalistic view. Like, you're just like, what do they kind of say? Like, fuck the patriarchy and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, like, I get what you're saying. However, there should also be checks and balances. Like, who are you accountable to? Like, you're just spouting your mouth off in the name of spirit. What spirit? Like, there's no form of regulation, which to me then brings into question about what are your morals, what are your ethics, where is your integrity, what is it actually rooted in? Because there have been so many times I'm like, and spirit says, and I'm like, what spirit? Please define the spirit. Because is your spirit the same as my spirit? Like, the ancestors? What the ancestors? You mean my ancestors or your ancestors? Let us break it down. Please, specifics. Sorry, my mind went in another direction there. But these are the things that I think are not signs or indicators, but you need to maybe have a bit more consideration when you're encountering people who have a position or have some sort of authority, whether it then can potentially bleed into a misuse or abuse of their power and authority. And I'm not saying that paperwork is the only thing, but push back, have some of these conversations and see what the response is that you get. And then once you have the response, that's when you need to step back and say, okay, what am I feeling? what am I intuiting within this experience or within my body? Give yourself time to
Mm-hmm.
process that, because that's how you foster and build your own energetic channel, as opposed to just trusting blindly the channel of someone else. I think also you mentioned about language being an important thing. And when you were talking, something that I was kind of reflecting on is I can remove this spirit. I can help you live. I can clear the path for you, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
you can. Simple, slight variance, or here is how you can. Here is how you may assist yourself. Slight difference between I'm going to do this for you versus here is the resources to resource yourself.
No. You are taking. I think we need to. Can you read that up again? Like, can we say this again? So it's no, because this is do you see that transition? And when you're hearing it, like, I know when you're in the moment of, I just need answers, you can't hear yourself clearly. But as you're speaking right now, it's like, cool. Even with the credentials, fine. Yes, you can push back on someone. Someone might, on one end, you can pick up how their spirit's feeling. On another end, they might start acting shifty, or they might produce even fake certificates. Who knows? But this part of the statement of what you've said, shifting that dialogue, shifting those command words, empowering that individual, yeah, you can't take away from that. So if you don't mind repeating that, please. I think our listeners need to hear that again.
It's just a simple, not simple, because that kind of maybe undermines it, like a subtle thing to
Yes.
pick up on, whether it's someone saying that I can heal this, I can do this for you, as opposed to you can do this, or here is how, let me show you type of language. I the whole, and I know we're going to come on to this, but the whole loop of keeping people within healing contracts or healing kind of entanglements, like the whole loop of keeping people in that vibration, for me, is a reflection of failure. And I'm so sorry to put it in this way. I'm so sorry, and I do not mean to cause offense. But if you have someone, and I'm speaking to the practitioners, to be honest, if you have
Yes.
someone on your books, and I'm not talking they come once and then they come and see you in a few years' time, and I'm obviously not talking to the counselors or therapists, because of course you're going to see them again until that season of work is done. But as a spiritual esoteric practitioner, if you have someone that's in the loop of coming back to you, I'm sorry, my dear, that's a failure. And especially if you're promoting and encouraging it, you're saying to that person that you are the one that can help, heal, fix, resolve them. That's ego.
Hey, no, guys, no, and you know what? Yeah, I love how this is coming from the spirit. They needed to hear this, and for sure they're going to be listening in. And I think, as an individual who isn't a practitioner but is on the opposite side as somebody who is a consumer of these products, services, I can say I feel the difference when people are not shoving things down my throat to have that dependency. And when people are giving me the choice to say, you know what, in your own time, when you're ready, you will come.
Yeah, there's a difference.
They're the difference. And I think, as you were speaking, I couldn't just help, like, the sector that I was thinking of quite strongly, even though we spoke about spiritual services as a whole, was the tarot girls. Sometimes if you see them on spaces like Twitter, there's some there's don't get me wrong, there are some who you can say, yeah, they're doing this because they generally want to empower people to make better decisions and take that knowledge and utilize it in ways that they will interpretate it in their own languages, use it in their own ways, and help them as a guiding tool, not to create dependency.
Yeah.
There are some people that detail their experiences on Twitter that it's almost become a nightmare to the point where they've had to stop completely because they were getting into a state of spiritual psychosis as well. So the dangers are real. The dangers, and that's why I say spiritual siphoning, energy siphoning, harboring and like festering people who you should release and clear the energy so they must be free. And it makes me think, so if you're harboring onto these people, what energy are you harvesting from them? Why do you need these dependencies so bad?
Yes, because it goes deeper than the financials. And I'm so glad you said that, because yes, they're receiving the monetary gain of having a repeated person come to them, but also it's feeding them on a very deep spiritual, not spiritual, what's the word? It's feeding some sort of their,
And I
it,
think, yeah,
it is a harvesting process. And that's scary.
child. Right. MI5 and MI6 agents, I know you're having a field day listening to us, but I will say the harvesting is real. And when we talk about being lost in the source and not being able to see clearly, it's because 9 times out of 10, our energy has been harvested, and I want to say been spread out, whether that's us taking our own 2 feet to go to these people and spread out our energy to the point where it's like, it's so thin that we can't even trace our source back to ourselves, or whether it's being harvested.
Yeah.
These are the dangers that lie ahead. And I think, even without going too much into the next part, which I know you're going to cover, which is where do you draw the line between what's spiritual and not? This point I keep being taken back to, it's like, if people who are like behavioral psychologists, people who like really study trends and patterns of like the human body and our interactions, the way we react to things, and these experts are saying that the people who tend to survive in like true crime instances, or just in instances where there's danger, where it's like fight and flight, it's those people who jump and go and follow their spirit at the first beck and call. Some of us, we have waited too long to see that the beck and call has called us, and it's even left and gone round again, and it's still trying to call us, but we can't see. And I've been there.
Yeah.
And this is why I try so hard now that, like, when I have an interpretation about a specific thing, I could be struggling with hell to get to know how to interpret that thing. And the interpretation might come a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later. But I can feel like, yeah, at least I've been equipped to understand this process.
True.
At least there hasn't been some sort of dependency. But yeah, let me stop there. Sometimes, like, the more, I don't know if it's the left-hand side of us that's more the rational side, but using more the left-hand side of our brains, right, to sometimes take a break.
Yeah.
Sometimes actually take, even though it hurt, like I can have a desire that there's something that's pops out now in my life, but I must know the answer. I will sometimes have to force myself, deprive myself. Remember how we spoke about need, want, and desire? I've been able to deprive myself sometimes of that desire, that need that initially feels like a need, but it's actually a want that is disguised as a desire to find out a particular thing. I've had to just be like, no, let me pause, let me center back to myself, let me figure out what my spirit is saying, the energy of my soul, what's the energetic saying here. And I think that's another like practical, realistic step.
I just think, that desire, want, need should be the gold standard in terms of your decision making about when to draw the line. Like, I think that perfectly encapsulates it. And I think what we're going to do is have a visual out there for this, because I can see it. And I think, I think this is how, for anyone who's listening, like, give yourself time to walk through that little 3-step process to figure out, when do I cut myself off? We also wanted to kind of talk about the green flags that have turned into red flags, again, as a way to raise awareness. Money. is one of the biggest things. And we have often spoken about it amongst ourselves in terms of this whole wave of, quote, feminine energy and charge your worth. And it's time to like show yourself you're worthy by charging £1,000,001 for an hour reading or something. Like, where do we draw the line with that? Is there this kind of misperception or skewed perception of the more someone charges, the better the reading will be? Like, yeah.
I'm flabbergasted. No, I'm sorry. Does the more... No, because it really, really, really seems this way that the more, and from, I say this from an Instagram perspective now, honing specific to this platform, it appears that those who are charging more, maybe, who knows, maybe they are providing higher levels or higher higher levels of energy healing or spiritual services. But to me, I sent this post to Mimi because I had come across this person's page. I do follow a lot of astrologers more than spiritualists per se, but I do follow some of the spiritual girlies. Now, one of the astrologers that I love had posted this individual's page, and they specialize in removing their specialities in their bio, state removing jinn, evil eye, bad, like dark spirits and omens. That's their speciality. And one day I happened to just be on the streets of Instagram, clicking through stories. I came across this person's Instagram like Q&A section where, you know, she was asking people, what's your spiritual problem? And I will detail the price that you need to pay. And somebody said that, you know what, they've been struggling to conceive, and this is something that's a desire of theirs. A lot of women across the world, you know, there is this innate desire to become a mother. For some people, it's not there, but for some, it is there quite strongly. And then the lady said, yeah, we can do spiritual IVF, and it's going to be around $13,000. I went cha-ching on my phone, took a screenshot, and sent that to Mimi. And I was like, this to me is outrageous because there's no guarantee. And as we've said throughout this whole conversation, there is no specific guarantee as to the results one is going to obtain. You can have all the faith in the world. You can have the belief. I do believe that energy is power. As we've been saying, it's our life force, it's our vitality, it's our guiding path. But in such areas that are very sensitive and delicate already, there is no bold claim that 13,000 is going to provide a solution for something that, even in scientific terms, is still not 100% guaranteed. And I think because the lines between scientific, there's this versus, like us versus them when it comes to science and spirit, because I get it that, you know, science can't, there is explanations around the metaphysical, but there also requires faith beyond seeing in the whole area of, you know, dealing with the spiritual world. But then I think to myself that, hold on, what is the actual guarantee for you charging this surcharge price? Because for the average American, this is not something that you just have willy-nilly, like, stacked up. And then to say that it's spiritual IVF. No, I do think that's heinous crimes against humanity. Like, what the hell is spiritual IVF? Like, I think that some people are taking it too far because they realize that you might actually generally have a gift. Cool. We're not disputing that. You might be called by the people that, you know, you work with. Like Mimi said, we might not know these ancestors, but they might actually very much live within you. That's fine. And you might specialize in removing certain spirits, whatever the case might be, cool. But when you put a price point to somebody's conception or ability to be a mother, and it's something that's already a vulnerable thing, where the person's already coming, we spoke about people coming to you in a vulnerable state. Their energy is disfranchised, fragmented, it's all over the place because they simply want answers and solutions. Then you're attaching this hefty price tag. Like, to me, it seems like a Ponzi scheme because there's no guarantee. And even if your spirit guides, I'm very sorry, and I will always stand in this. Even if you are generally called here to help, you will help the individual, even if it means that they don't even have zero to give you. Because why? You are actually called to do the helping work. There are going to be people, if you're actually on the path of being a healer, being a prophet, being a prophetess, being whichever type of healing person you're here to be in this world, if there's somebody who is in your direct path and you can see they're in dire need and you are called as you say you're called, there's no way that you're going to ignore this person and not render them help. And you will not be charging no 13K price tag attached to that. So for me, yes, it's very concerning how platforms such as, how social media and the digitalization of these services is almost equating to the inflation in the pricing, the tariffs. It's almost like join this subscription and you get this. Where do you draw the line in between accessing healing? Because if we can't access the healing, but you are a healer, who are you going to end up healing in the end then? Because the price is no. Who do you actually end up healing? Then is it glamorous healing where you're healing the select few who don't even need the healing, but they can afford the price tag that's attached to it? Or are you helping the masses who generally need the assistance, the liberation, the emancipation, let me not get spiritual because I'm feeling the goosebumps coming on, but do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, you've said it just pinpoint perfect, but it also, that vulnerability aspect is the bit that gets me, and something that I've seen amongst the spiritual coaching industry, because there is an intersection between the spiritual and the coaching industry. But the coaching industry as a whole, I'm not a coach, and I've always said this, and I will never call myself a coach. But what I have witnessed is this whole pain point marketing and how blatant and loud and clear people are in promoting that as a marketing tool. But then the other side of it is I see people doing their marketing in such a way that is quite underhanded, and you don't even realize that they're picking on your wounds. You don't realize that they're opening up the wounds, and they're saying, oh, but I've got the solution for you, and here's this big hefty fee to pay so that I can tend to those wounds. Again, rather than here is how you, and softening that approach so that it's here's the resource, here's the empowerment. And that the whole money politics relates to pain marketing, and how that is kind of infused in such a way to almost like put a veil on people and to disguise people, because you're lost in that sea of emotion of your own vulnerability, emotion of what you're trying to get an answer to or heal or resolve, that you will just try absolutely anything. So whilst it might seem like someone's got a really helpful solution and they really want to help you because they really care and they're called to do this work, maybe just pause and question the intentions of what is behind that and the energy that you feel behind that. And this is a large reason why I don't stay on Instagram, why I haven't been on Instagram anymore, because I was just I was over consuming, and I felt like my energy was like, this is too much, and I couldn't take it anymore, seeing and witnessing all of that. And I also could not be a part of that. It's just not where my integrity lies, me personally. What you guys do, that's for you, but me, nah, me done. Nope.
No. Yeah. You know what? Not even to get into, because we still got a few points to go through, but I think I definitely have seen the darker side of these coaches, and how what's scary to me is how the rebrand is it's overnight. The rebrand you can just change everything and become a psychic the next day.
Because spirit dead.
And and God bless you. Oh my God. But do you see now the dangers? And this is what we start, like when Mimi said, you need to look with your eyes, like searching and look. You actually do. If you're going to be we're not saying abandon all of these services, abandon these practitioners, abandon whatever healing practices you know, subscribe to, pay for, consult for, but have your wits about you. But yes, I'm going to let you get on to the next part. Sorry.
I think one of the last ones in terms of the green flags that I want to just talk about is the being chosen versus being targeted. So this is more for people who are already involved with a practitioner, or you're already in like a spiritual kind of program or whatever, and you're there, you've done the work, and you're like, great, fantastic. Then you're told, or you're upselled to, so you're told about the very next thing that you can graduate into or up to for double, triple the amount, or for, I don't know, whatever it is. And in that moment, you can feel like, because it's like a graduation, that you have done something, you have shed something that has enabled those doors to open up for you. And you might feel chosen, and that you have got the approval from whoever this person is, which, by the way, is a red flag, because you've put that practitioner on a pedestal then, rather than putting yourself on that pedestal. And that is how I feel you can become vulnerable to being targeted.
We just wanted to go over perhaps instances in which ancestral connection, reconnection is not favorable. And this is not to say that this is the case for everybody, but you know, what sparked this thought was a show that I watched called Lozzie Lamb, which is, you know, by a medium called Sis Tembi. And she basically, this episode was season 14, episode 2. A lady, you know, was trying to connect with her mother who passed on the other side. But in this reading, the energy was so stifled, so stagnant, so very bitter. And, you know, initially it kind of seemed like the child had done something to the mother. But as the episode progressed, it was like this ancestor simply, you know, didn't want this person while they were alive, was doing everything in their willpower to sabotage this individual's life. And now that they've crossed over to the other side, they're still very adamant that they don't want any relations with this child as an ancestor. So, you know, it kind of got me speaking to me about like, what are some of the instances? Because typically it is pushed that reconnection should happen on both sides. This is something that I was told myself, but there isn't necessarily investigation around why there isn't already a connection, even if, or is a connection even viable in the circumstances specific to this individual. In an ideal world, yes, you know, you'd love to have both paternal and maternal sides together, working together. But I've also seen people on, you know, the Southern African side of spirituality on TikTok speak about the very fact that they sometimes believe that traditional healers promote deadbeat fatherism. So like fathers who've not been present, but all of a sudden you're told in a consultation that you must reconnect and realign. And I just kind of want to find out from a remedial perspective, what are some of the instances or ways around this? And when do you think, you know, feel free to talk about your own experiences, or, you know, you can reference mine. Where do you believe that people should kind of draw the line with wanting to connect, even if they have been told by somebody in a consultation that they must connect with both sides and restore the connection?
Yeah. So my first thought is that if we're talking about ancestors in proximity, so within your lifetime, or people you may have known or had a connection with, or potentially could have, like that to me is like the first starting point of, well, did you even have a relationship with them when they were here? Like, and if you did, what was that relationship like? Because I think that is more valid, and we should uphold that relationship even when they pass. Like I was watching something yesterday, and this woman was talking about her late sister, and the other person was saying to her, oh, like she was such a nice person, I heard she was this, I heard she was that, like really charitable. And the sister was like, don't do that. Everyone always speaks positively about the dead, but when they were here, they were an asshole. And that for me encapsulates it. We like to like put people who have passed on a pedestal just because they have passed. But when they were here, if they were a shitty person, that's not going to change just because they've transitioned into spirit. And I think you have to understand that relationship and come to peace with that relationship in real life before you start to go search for the ancestral meaning or connection. And I think sometimes traditional readers, healers, whatever you want to call them,
Mm-hmm.
they have their own lens that they view things on. And sometimes it's like, well, once they're ancestors, they can do no harm, or, you know, they are all good and all holy. But I don't agree with that. So I often refer to this as like remedial work, and it's just trying to find a remedy or a middle ground is how I view it. And that to me means center your experience at the core of it. Don't let go of that experience, because that matters.
Yeah. And you know what? As you were speaking, sometimes remedial work is the better option. The This is never to say that in your lifetime that, you know, connection can never be established, but I think perhaps whilst you're still navigating the situation, the grounds around your connection, assessing what your real life connection was like, with a guidance, with somebody who understands different facets of life, like somebody who is willing to understand that in real life you didn't have this connection with this particular parent, and they aren't dismissing that. They're not dismissing your experiences. Somebody who is also versed in, you know, the well-being and the mental health spaces, who can actually hold this space for you whilst you navigate this, and not just push this down a you must reconnect path, or you must not. Well, actually, it's never you must not. It's always you must reconnect with both sides. But I think, yeah, the remedial side seems to be something that might be a bit more beneficial for people who, I mean, even if you aren't estranged from your parents or you don't have strained relations, I still think it's something that is offered and available for everybody. But if you are considering reconnection, and you know there's a bit of bumps and curves in your journey, in your family's, you know, connections or disconnections, I think that's something to look out for, rather than just being told you must connect, the end, and you're on a wild goose chase. Like, you're chasing things, but who knows, you might not even need to connect with these specific people. There might be ways around it. So yeah, that's something to consider. Oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to link it back to your point about one size fits all. Like, if you that is, if you see or hear someone saying to you that you must reconnect, that's another example of one size fits all, and how maybe it's not one size fits all
Yeah.
because it doesn't apply to your situation. But a lot of people have asked me, well, how do you go about remedial work? And to be honest, like, I'll look at them and I'll be like, well, I don't know your circumstances. I don't know your relationship. Like, if I got to know you and your experiences, then I could give you an answer. And I think people don't like that because we're so used to consuming, this is how, and this is this, and that. But you need to understand the person who you're sitting opposite. You need to understand their spirit and what's going on in their spiritual template before you can start advising what type of or how to remedy those relationships.
And this work is very subjective, and that's why we advocate and we scream from the rooftops that it's not a one size fit all policy, because it's very subjective to your personal circumstances. We're not going to take Mimi's life and then apply the same scenario to Emily's life, or take Emily's life and apply the same rules and the tools to Mimi's life, because they're very subjective and different experiences. Yes, we might meet in the middle with certain things, but we have different experiences. I think that's something to bear in mind, that your life is not a one size fit all policy here. You are not an insurance policy. You are an individual with multi-colors, and you have multiple experiences. And I think that's something to bear in mind. So, onto the favorable part. You know, the part that's very interesting about what we do, the hot seat question. And I would like to ask you, Mimi, for our listeners out there who may be curious, just like we are, or should I say we once were. I think curiosity never really kills the cat, so we're always still going to be curious. But you know, for the listeners out there just like us who may still want to consult or practice or purchase spiritual readings, or engage with spiritual practitioners to find out the answers, the guidance that they're looking for. What advice could you share with listeners? But in terms of practical and intuitive steps, like what's something that you would say if there was two things that you had to do, one from a practical lens, one from an intuitive lens, how could you lean into your spirit and trust the energetics of your own life as a language when dealing with these areas of life?
I don't know if these are practical, spiritual, but first thing I would say is sit with and understand why you need the answers, and like really pause and take the time to like figure out why do you seek the answers that you're trying to get, and what will you gain from whatever answers will come back to you. I think you have to understand the root, as you said, the core of your why before entering into that process. And then the second is actually what you said right at the start, like run it through that 3-tier system. Is it a desire, want, or need? And I think that for me is that chef's kiss, because I think that will enable you to then figure out, do I do this or not do this? I guess from a spiritual, energetic perspective, it's always going to be about cultivating a relationship with your body for me, because once you have that relationship with your body, you'll start to figure out what your warning signs are and what your yay signs are. And once you understand the differences between, is this a yay or a nay on a bodily level, that's it. That's your golden ticket. What would you
The
say?
warning signs. No, the warning signs, man. Like I really love how like the desire, the need and want is a framework which we will elaborate on as a resource, as a written post, something. We'll figure out something. But I think you see this part about the warning signs, the body languages, the symptoms your body is trying to display to you. Are you coming out with the rash? Are you coming out with, palpitations all of a sudden that you didn't have? What's your energy sitting like? How are you feeling inside your body? Can you sleep? Have you been restless prior to this reading? Were you restless after this reading? I think the warning signs, this is why I'm clapping with my little fingers. The warning signs for me will always, because they will be your saving graces. Even when you are lost in the source, something will signal through as the energetics, the spirit. Remember we said it's your vitality force. It's the energy that lives and resides within you. This can be your literal saving grace from years of, I'm going to say, spiritual abuse and exploitation. Yeah. So I really hone onto the part, like if there's anything that you said outside of the desire, the needs and the wants, it's the warning signs. The green flags that might look like green that eventually turn into red. And I think more time than not, if we look back at our own experiences, like that we could see that 1+1 is not really making 2 here. Like something's amiss. And it might not, you're not disqualifying the whole reading. You're not disqualifying everything that was said, but there's specific parts. We talked about the wording, the words being spoken to you. Are they equipping you with the empowerment and the resources to take charge of your own life? Or are they equipping you for a cycle of dependency? Are they equipping you to speak life into you and revitalize your energy force, even if you're not at a stage where you're at that level yet? Or are you being cultivated to always purchase and endlessly purchase? Yeah. So that's what I would say.
A word.
So that brings us to the end of our bonus episode, which is episode 10, Trusting Energetics as a Language. I would honestly, wholeheartedly, and I know Mimi shares the same sentiments, would like to thank the listeners that have been listening, supporting our baby pod, and, just seeing the ways that we've been growing and evolving. This is our bonus episode, so we wanted to do this because it was something that we felt that needed to be addressed, but also as a way to say thank you, thank you for supporting us. And, we don't take it for granted. I also wanted to let you guys know, just in case you're new and you've not listened to us before, we also have our Facebook page that is now fully up and running. So if you wanted to join us as a community group on there, it's Two Mutables in a Pod. Am I right, Mimi? With it? Yep.
Yeah.
So you can find us on Facebook and join us and be part of our family. We also have a few mini trailer clips that are on YouTube under the same username, Two Mutables in a Pod, where we just, play around with our creativity, but also really hone into the trailer clips of what we think are like parts of the audio that stand out for us. So it would be lovely to hear what you think about these, if you've been enjoying them, and share your thoughts and opinions. And lastly, we have Revoke the Contract, which was written by my homegirl and co-host Mimi Makina, and she poured her heart, body and soul into this piece. And you can find this on our Substack. So if you ever wanted, in the times where we aren't releasing our monthly episodes, if you ever wanted to catch up with what we've been doing, you can find us on Substack, YouTube, Facebook, and anywhere in between. So thank you so much for listening, and we hope to see you in our next recording. Take care for now. Bye.